President Traore of Burkina Faso is currently fighting two wars. The first is against terrorists and the second is against Western media.
Let's get you more on this evolving situation in Burkina Faso.
Ibrahim Traore.
Burkina Faso.
You see, right from when he stepped into power and proved himself to be a staunch anti-imperialist, Western media, especially those backed by France, has waged an information war against Traore. Recently, about 8 Burkinabe journalists were arrested by Traore's administration. And, as expected, all the Western media houses have carried the news, claiming that Traore is suppressing freedom of speech and calling him a dictator. But where were they when Traore was busy investing in the Burkinabe military to fight against terrorism? In today's video, we are going to analyze this development and reveal the truth about the arrest of these Burkinabe journalists. In September 2024, the US banned RT, a Russian media house from Africa, without first consulting Africans on the issue. For a country that is supposedly the champion of free speech, how exactly does this promote free speech? But not only did the US ban RT, but it also used its influence to ensure that about 20 African media platforms on different social media platforms whose views did not align with that of the US were immediately removed. According to the US, these media houses were pushing Russian propaganda. The US made these claims without giving any proof. You see, in recent times, African countries have gradually shifted from the West and turned to Russia and China for partnership. Instead of trying to figure out the real reason why this has happened, the US somehow came to the conclusion that the reason for the shift was because Russia has been paying African media houses to spread false information about the West. It's like the US feels that Africans are so dumb that they cannot think for themselves. But we all know the truth. The shift from the West to non-Western countries like Russia and China has absolutely nothing to do with the Russian misinformation campaign. Rather, African countries are just getting tired of decades of partnership with the West, which has not benefited them. Now, the reason we are bringing this up is that when the US banned RT and eliminated those African media platforms, no one batted an eye. Western media did not call it suppression of free speech, which was actually what it was. But when an African country does a similar thing, these Western media did not hesitate to call it suppression of free speech. It would seem that the West is simply the law. What a double standard. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment and subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this. Now, a few days ago, all the Western media that has been particularly quiet about Burkina Faso began to publish the same news with similar headlines. The headline says, Burkina Faso journalist abducted after criticizing press freedom. According to them, 2 Burkinabe journalists were arrested last week after they criticized the deteriorating state of Burkina Faso's media landscape. These journalists were Guezuma Sanogo and Bukari Uba, both of whom are directors of the Association of Journalists of Burkina Faso. The interesting thing is that Guezuma Sanogo was recently elected as president of the Association of Journalists of Burkina Faso. Now, during the association's extraordinary congress, he condemned the junta's total stranglehold on the country's public media, which he said had been transformed into propaganda tools. In simple terms, this Burkinabe journalist said that Traore has suppressed free speech in Burkina Faso and has used the media as a propaganda tool. The AJB also described the attacks on freedom of expression and the press since the junta took power as unprecedented. 3 days later, after making this declaration, Sanogo and Bulari Uba were immediately arrested by members of Burkina Faso's intelligence service. They were arrested at the Norbert Zongo National Press Center in Ouagadougou, the capital, and taken to an unknown location. Since their arrest, Western media as well as different media associations have blown up. Western media analysts and even some African analysts have condemned the move and demanded that these journalists be released. According to Sadibou Marong, director of RSF Sub-Saharan Africa, stated that the arrest of journalists Guezuma Sanogo and Bukari Uba, 3 days after their association publicly condemned the deteriorating press freedom in Burkina Faso, is part of a strategy to systematically silence all critical voices in the country. He noted that the tactics used in this case mirror the numerous arrests and kidnappings orchestrated by the military authorities since taking power. Maronite further noted that the war effort promoted by the head of the Burkinabe junta, Ibrahim Traore, is once again being used to destroy journalism in Burkina Faso, and called on the authorities to make the fate and whereabouts of these two AJB leaders public and to release them without delay. Aside from Marong, the International Federation of Journalists and the Federation of African Journalists has also condemned the move. It is completely intolerable that journalistic leaders are being persecuted, harassed, and illegally detained simply for representing their colleagues and defending the principles of independent journalism, said Omar Farouk Osman, FAJ president. Anthony Belanger, IFJ General Secretary, called on Burkinabe authorities to end their repressive campaign against journalists, guarantee the safety and physical integrity of the detained leaders, and respect their international commitments on freedom of expression and freedom of association. Reaffirming their unwavering solidarity with the AJB and the journalistic community in Burkina Faso, the IFJ and FAJ urged all African journalist unions, the broader continental trade union movement, and international press freedom organizations to raise their voices and mobilize in defense of these two unjustly detained journalists. Human Rights Watch has also published an article regarding Burkina Faso's media landscape. The article listed 4 Burkinabe journalists that have been arrested by Traore's administration. The article also emphasized that dozens of journalists have been forced to flee Burkina Faso under threat of imprisonment, torture, enforced disappearance, and forced conscription because of their work. Now, hearing all this, what does it make you think? If we were not abreast with the Western media propaganda, we would have thought that President Traore is a dictator. We would have thought that he is a wicked leader who only wants power for himself. But we know that Traore is completely different from that. Now, let's analyze the situation. It is very true that Traore indeed arrested these journalists. But the interesting thing is that just a few days before their arrest, Traore said something striking in a speech. He said that there is currently an ongoing war on communications and that the imperialists may use it to set fire to the country. In simple terms, he foretold all that is currently happening. You see, the media is a very powerful tool that anyone can use to change the minds of the people. This is why whenever a coup is about to occur, one of the first places that the military tries to control is the country's national media houses. Usually, in true democracy, there is freedom of speech, which means anyone can exercise their opinions and criticize the government. Now, in a country like Burkina Faso, dealing with insecurity and underdevelopment, where Traore has stepped on several feet, including that of Burkinabe politicians who want to get back to power in the West, especially France, the media is even more powerful. This is because the West and these politicians can take hold of the media and spread their propaganda. With the media, they can push a particular narrative about President Traore and cause unrest among the people. This would eventually lead to a mutiny in the military and an overthrow of Traore's government. This is why any strong leader with a clear vision would immediately take control of the media and ensure that the right message is passed. This is exactly what Traore is doing by arresting these journalists. You see, if you observe critically, these so-called Burkinabe journalists arrested by Traore's administration have one thing in common. They have never offered any words of support to the Burkinabe soldiers, fighting to eliminate the insecurity in the country. These soldiers, who are people's fathers and sons, have pledged their lives to fight against the insecurity that has plagued the country for almost 10 years. In the process, some of them die and would only be remembered by their loved ones and the military. These soldiers have given their life to try and make the country safe for these journalists. Yet there is no single encouragement from them. Instead, like the West, these unpatriotic journalists are more concerned about news that would fuel unrest among the people. These journalists are focused on highlighting negative aspects of the military's fight against terrorism, something that the West would do. How patriotic is that? President Traore is just one man who is focused on making the country safe, and all Burkinabes need to work with him, especially the Burkinabe media. One thing we have observed is that President Traore would not tolerate anyone criticizing Burkinabe soldiers in the fight against terrorism, especially given the fact that they lay their life on the line. This reminds us of a similar thing that happened last year. Despite all that Traore has done to combat terrorism and the gains the country has gotten, A media doctor came out publicly to criticize the efforts of the Burkinabe military. This doctor felt that Traore was not doing enough to solve the insecurity. The doctor posted his opinion on his social media handle, criticizing the Burkinabe military and the soldiers for not doing enough to combat the insecurity. In response, President Traore invited the medical doctor to his office and gave directions to his officers to take him to the front line. And truly, the medical doctor was outfitted, given a gun, and sent for training. According to Traore, since he feels that the military is not doing enough, he should lend his expertise in the field. There is no doubt that the same fate awaits those Burkinabe journalists. Being a leader requires one to make certain decisions that will not be regarded as good by all, but sometimes those decisions are necessary. The truth is that this move might seem dictatorial to some because people have come to believe in democracy as the best form of government, and democracy allows people the right to exercise their opinions. But what if those opinions are detrimental to the vision of the leader? This is one of the reasons why every revolutionary government, including that of Thomas Sankara, was resisted by some of their people. You see, these people believe in free speech. But what they do not know is that those who oppose revolutionary government and those who oppose development and growth can take advantage of that. Take Muammar Gaddafi, for example. Freedom of speech allowed the US to use the media to paint Gaddafi as a dictator. The US made false allegations against Gaddafi, claiming that he wanted to kill the people of Libya, but there was no evidence. Unfortunately, this false news read by some Libyans was enough to cause unrest in the country. And together with some people paid by the US to protest, these Libyans that had enjoyed under Gaddafi's rule began to protest against Gaddafi, calling for his removal. It was exactly what the US was for. They intervened in Libya, bombing the country, claiming that it was a call from the people of Libya. At the end of the day, Gaddafi was eliminated. Can you see how powerful the media is and how it can be used to overthrow a government that the West does not like? This is what is being planned for President Traore. But President Traore knows. He knows the strategy of the West. This is why he announced a war on communications. This is why he said that the imperialists would use it to set fire on the country. And that's what is happening in Burkina Faso. The West, especially France, is working in the background with the help of some elements in Burkina Faso to remove Traore from power. The best way to do this is either through a coup or an assassination. But before planning a coup or an assassination, they have to use the power of the media to control the narrative. The fact is that whoever controls the media controls the country. This is what a lot of people do not know. The interesting thing is that Western powers, which are supposedly democratic, understand this rule. It is the reason why the US is always talking about Russian propaganda and Russia is always talking about US propaganda. The ordinary people would think that there is actually free speech, but the truth is that people's opinions are guided by the government in power. Everything is all about creating a narrative that will control how people think about the government in power. You see, this narrative is why ordinary Western citizens think that China's communist government is dictatorial and evil. They have been told by their government for decades that China's communist government is suppressing the people, and they do not have free speech and all that. But it wasn't until TikTok was banned and Americans, for example, moved to a Chinese app, that they discovered that their government had been lying to them for decades. The Chinese do not feel that they are oppressed. They are happy with their government, and the country is progressing even much more than the US with its so-called freedom of speech. So, in Burkina Faso, instead of those journalists to focus on publishing news that would encourage patriotism and boost the morale of the soldiers to fight against terrorism, they are focused on suppression of free speech. Anyways, we applaud the move of President Traore. As we said earlier, those journalists would no doubt be taken to the war front to fight against terrorism. Western media has called it illegal conscriptions, but that's their business. President Traore is readily available for the war against terrorism and communications. This is why Traore, together with the two leaders of the Sahel, launched AES TV to counter the fake news published by Western media. To commemorate the one-year anniversary of the formation of the Alliance of the Sahel Bloc, the military leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso decided to launch their own web television. The purpose of the web TV is to fight the information war launched by Western media against the three leaders. This announcement followed the closure of several French media outlets, including France 27 in the three countries. According to an official of Mali's Department of Communication, the AES bloc is faced with disinformation campaigns, and thus Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have decided to take the lead by creating a new communication platform. The Web TV is part of a broader strategy aimed at strengthening the credibility of the AES on the international scene. In simple terms, the military leaders of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso are fed up with the narrative constantly pushed by Western media, which has made many in the international scene regard them as bad news. So the formation of Web TV is an attempt to change the narrative in the international scene and to ensure that their voice is heard. In a separate statement, Ibrahim Traore, special advisor to Mali's Minister for Communication, said, "Right now, everything is set and ready. We are waiting for leaders to officially launch it." Mali's President Assimi Goïta had announced the launch of a new AES television station in one of his addresses to the AES Confederation. Following the announcement, a common communication strategy roadmap was established by the ministries of the AES member nations in August 2024. Directors of news agencies of the alliance had met to elaborate a common communication strategy some 3 months ago. The interesting thing is that on December 28, 2024, the Burkinabe Minister of Communication, Gilbert Pingwende Ouedraogo, arrived in Bamako to participate in the official launch of the Web TV of the Confederation of Sahel States. This means that it took less than 3 months following the announcement of the proposed launch for the Web TV to be formed. This is remarkable, and it shows that when African countries unite together for a common purpose, it will be achieved. According to the reports, the Burkinabe Minister of Communication, Mr. Ouedraogo, and his counterparts from Niger and Mali will give the starting signal for this digital television, which is responsible for transmitting reliable and instantaneous information, as well as awareness-raising messages. The ministers responsible for AES communication will also adopt the Confederation's graphic charter and the terms of reference for the AES's future TV and radio stations. The launch of the AES digital platform was preceded by the work of a workshop. It was opened by the Minister of Communication, Digital Economy, and Modernization of the Administration, Alhamdou Ag Ilyene, with at his side the Director General of Radio Diffusion Television du Burkina, RTB, Ateridar Galipsum, and Saidou Daoura, Technical Advisor to the President of the National Council of Public Safety, CNSP, of Niger. Following the workshop, the public media of the AES countries signed a memorandum of understanding to strengthen partnership and collaboration in the audiovisual field. Further reports of the launch revealed that the document on the creation of the AES TV and radio channels that the experts have finalized will be presented to the ministers in charge of AES communication. 3 drafts of the AES graphic charter will be submitted to them to retain a proposal for the heads of state. Again, this is remarkable. The launch of the AES Web TV has demonstrated its unwavering commitment to reclaiming the narrative of the Sahel and establishing a united front against external misinformation by Western media. Now, the use of Western media to create a false narrative about the 3 countries is the reason why Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso suspended some Western media. In Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traore announced in October 2024 that the media house, Voice of America, funded by the US, has been suspended from airing its content in Burkina Faso. It was the latest move taken by President Traore against the narrative published by the West regarding not just Burkina Faso, but also Mali and Niger. Traore decided to take the measure following the broadcast of a controversial debate on VOA on September 19, 2024, in which participants commented on the security crisis in Burkina Faso and its neighboring countries. On this issue, the Supreme Communications Council accused VOA of undermining the morale of Burkina Faso and Malian soldiers. The council particularly objected to describing the recent attacks in Bamako as courageous, adding that VOA's reporting on security operations was unfairly critical. Think about it. These people live comfortably in the United States without fear of terrorist attacks. Unless you live in Burkina Faso or another country in Africa, you can't really know the situation. But they always seem to have an opinion about the insecurity in these countries and how they think things should be. This is the typical Western complex of superiority and paternalism at work. Imagine saying that JNIM's actions were courageous. How do you think the soldiers and citizens of Burkina Faso who are listening to this broadcast will feel? But thankfully, these media houses have been suspended from Burkina Faso. While the West can call it suppression of free speech, in our opinion, Traore is simply protecting his country. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel.